Hey everyone, welcome into episode 5 of Jubilee Gardens. And as usual, I'm joined by Commando Santa. How's it going, man?
Hello, I'm doing good.
Good deal. So yeah, this was sort of an interesting build couple weeks for me. I feel like I started a lot of things, but didn't necessarily finish a lot of it. So so the time lapse will be kind of interesting. You guys will see I'm doing some of the theming around this big wheel here, and then later on do some work in like a parking lot. Nothing like on Uthris level. We didn't want to go that crazy. I think after what he's done, I don't think anyone can trump that parking lot. So we just wanted something pretty simple to kind of frame in the front of the park, and I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. So most of it, like I said, though, will be this big wheel here. And I started off, this was inspired by again, Jubilee Gardens in Denver. They have sort of this round retaining wall around the big wheel there with the berm that, you know, has some flowers and some landscaping on it. And so I wanted to kind of mimic that, and it's not quite the same. I did do some things that are a little bit different, and the building structure that goes on it that kind of represents the queue, I wanted it to feel all like one collective building instead of like different queue lines, if that makes sense. So you'll see what I mean kind of as we get into that. But initially just framing out the landscaping here, and I really struggle with the landscape or the terrain tool, and I'm actually pretty happy with how it turned out here. It's like one of the few times that it's actually turned out the way that I envisioned it would. So I don't know if you struggle with it, but I do.
Oh, always, you know. But one of the things I want to point out, which was one of the things I wanted to do in my episode, but I just didn't get any time, was raising up the Ferris wheel onto that berm was such a great idea, because one of the original ideas that I had that we talked about was actually having the Ferris wheel, or at least some kind of ride, behind that train station, and looking down Main Street is just a beautiful sight with the train station and the top of the kind of the tower there, and then the Ferris wheel goes around it, and it only works because you put it on that berm.
Yeah, there's so like I actually did it at various levels, and where it looked the best, honestly, it would have just been way too high. Like when you're on the ground next to it, it would have been way too high up in the air. But,
oh, really?
Yeah, so I feel like I got a pretty healthy balance in terms of, you know, it's still, like you said, from the main street, it still pops up above the train station, like you can see it, but it's not quite as pronounced as I would like it to be, but it just would have been way too high up in the air. I mean, as it is, it's probably almost, just by judging from the queue, it's probably 5 meters off the ground. So
that isn't too bad.
Yeah. But the end result I'm really happy with. You know, at this point in time, there's not really a ton that I'm doing. Like I said, I wanted to make it feel like one main building, and that's something that I've noticed like a lot of people doing over at the Shy Guy World, where you know, instead of, I'm trying to think of the best way to describe what I'm talking about. So like hiding the paths, for example. So you can see right there where I have the queues. Right now it looks kind of like disjointed. And if you actually use building pieces to hide all of those gaps and fill in all the gaps and hide the paths themselves, you can make it look like it's all one structure, like it would in a real park. And so that's really the first time I've tried building like scenery on a flat in that manner. And so it was definitely a different way of thinking than I'm used to, but I think it turned out pretty good.
Yeah, it did really turn out really well. I'm very happy with how that was almost like exactly what I wanted right there.
Perfect. Good. So here it's getting into the cover, and this was a struggle. So initially I didn't really know, like I knew in my head theoretically what I wanted it to look like, but actually making it work was not easy. And this was actually inspired by a lot of like queue covers you can see in like a lot of the drop rides. It's where it's got almost like a stretched canvas over the queue, the entire area, and it's very geometric where it covers the entire, you know, queue area, including the exit. And So that was the inspiration for it. And if you are grossed out by the blue color right now, don't worry. I sent it to Commando Santa, and it was like, that looks like a tarp.
Yeah, it does. It looks like someone just put like a really cheap Walmart tarp on top of it.
Yeah, FEMA came by and threw the tarps up. So.
Exactly.
So I ended up changing it to more of a gray color, which you'll see further into the time lapse here, and it worked out well because it blends a little more harmoniously into the train station next to it, but it's still, I don't know, there was a couple of different gray colors I went with because sometimes if I went too dark it looked like metal, and even the color that I ended up with looks a little bit like that. And so I'll show in the time lapse here where I added some detail underneath to sort of give it that look like it's that stretched canvas. But yeah, overall, I think pretty successful cover. It's not, I didn't want it to be so big either that it like, you know, I just wanted it to cover like the bottom probably quarter of the ride as well. I didn't want it to be, it's already tall enough as it is being off the ground. I didn't want the building itself to make it feel any taller.
Yeah. And you like didn't really want to like cover the queue with a building too, because that would have been, I think it would have been too much to cover the queue with a building, in all honesty.
Yeah, and so I guess this is a good time too to talk about kind of what this building ended up spurring in our own discussions about the direction of the park. You know, as I was working on this and kind of building and just thinking about the big wheel in general, you know, you and I started talking about, you know, our initial plans for the park being several themed areas that are based on certain decades of architecture or certain styles of architecture in different time periods. And after doing this building, we both kind of agreed that for many reasons that we're going to go in more of a generic direction for the park. There will still be, you know, specifically themed areas, but we're not going to restrict ourselves to just doing, you know, certain style of architecture in certain areas, just because I think that would be really difficult and it would limit us in terms of a lot of the types of rides we could use. Like you said, if we were to put a building around this that was within the theme of, you know, a certain style of architecture we've already used or plan on using, it would be too much. It's, as it is now, it's open air. It feels like something that should be in a theme park. It just makes more sense than if there was like a full building covering the queue.
And our themes we were discussing with like Art Deco and Victorian era 1950s, that kind of stuff, it would be so hard to theme like a Ferris wheel like this after one of those.
Yeah, like I'm sure it could be done, and people more creative than either one of us could probably find a way to do it and make it look good and make it feel like it's a theme park. But you know, it's just based on feedback we've been receiving from people as well. You know, for my Paris park, one of the pieces of constructive criticism I've gotten, which I agree with, is that, you know, it looks really nice, but it doesn't necessarily always feel like a theme park. And I agree with that, which to some extent it's unavoidable because it's, you know, it's hard to build a theme park based off of a city and not have it feel like a city. But I did not want to have that issue in this park here. And I feel like by restricting ourselves to certain styles in certain areas, we might run into that problem. And I think we still definitely want to have some of those styles in the park. Like we've both collected so much source material based on those certain styles that there's buildings we love and we're going to put in the park, but we're just not going to force ourselves to be that rigid in terms of the style. So
yeah, exactly. We're not going to throw out like everything, you know, but the basic idea we were talking about before we started recording this and over the past weeks was, we want to have a super nice, contemporary, generic park and then actually turn it into a theme park by having these maybe heavily themed areas with our alternate themes that we want to do. So almost like you step through a gate and you come into this theme and then you can leave, and it keeps everything a little bit more generic so we can fit all the rides in there. But then if we want to have a themed area, we can. Yeah,
like another example of a ride, it's like, you know, I think it would be cool to have a log flume, but I'm not creative enough to think of a way to to theme a log flume around like Art Deco or the 50s or I mean, I'm sure there are people that are creative enough to do that, but it makes my head hurt, and this is just a game. This is just a game, so that shouldn't be the case.
Yeah, and I mean, at the same point, we both have full-time jobs, and we could do it. Don't get us wrong, we can do it, but we would spend so much time trying to get it to look right.
Yeah, exactly. And just the level of detail required as well, not only from a frame rate standpoint, but just a time perspective would be a lot too. And some of the feedback we've gotten as well, which is also very helpful, is it was actually N7 from Bro Coaster Series on your last video commented that our park is almost like too pristine, it's almost too perfect, which I think is fair. And if you're not familiar with the Bro Coaster series, which if you're watching this you probably are, but if you're not, you should definitely check it out. Their park is very realistic. It's got like a whole backstory to it, and they really have nailed. Like you can actually download the park on the workshop. I'm not sure if they want that advertised, but I've spent some time in it, and when you just like get in the Tegged Cam and walk around, it just feels like a park that has history. It feels like a park that has character and has been there forever, and it's a park that people's children's children, are going to have the chance to go to or have been to. And so I think there's a fair balance of what we have right now, which is really clean, really neat, and also having some areas of the park that maybe have a little more history and a little more character and aren't quite as nice. So, which building something, I know you and I were talking about this, but building something that has that type of character where it looks right, but it's intentionally a little bit kind of old or run down or things like that is not easy to do, at least not for me.
Yeah, that's actually really tough. And I'm like, and that's almost our issues, especially you with Paris Park. I mean, we're both pretty much perfectionists. Like, we want everything to look pristine, and that was the basis of that comment. Everything was almost too perfect, and we need a little bit more areas that are overgrown and a little bit maybe deteriorated and, just forgotten in some parts as well. So I think that would actually add some really nice stuff to this park.
Yeah, exactly. And we were talking about it kind of before we started recording, and I don't think we're going to go back and change anything, because the areas that we've done so far, it would make sense for that if the park was going to invest and really maintain any areas of the park, it would make sense that it's the entrance and the main street and sort of the area that we're in right now. So from that standpoint, we're not going to go back and rework anything or make it kind of run down or feel like a little bit older than it is, because it would make sense that maybe these areas are a little bit nicer, but it's definitely something we're going to keep in mind moving forward. So, but it's like I said, it's not easy. It's totally a different way of thinking and a different way of building than what I'm used to.
It really is. I have that trouble with Buffalo Valley, and it is a old style park, but it's really hard to make it look old. It's a struggle sometimes. Yeah, absolutely. So speaking of stuff that's probably too perfect, so I worked on making the Jubilee logo here in the flowers, which I'm really happy with. I don't think I have footage of where I've put it, the final placement of it, because I had to do some tweaking, but it'll be in the cinematics at the end. But I'm happy with how it turned out. I think it actually, the curvature and stuff, it made me really wish that we had different art shapes, because it looks better than the actual logo, I think. Yes.
So I wish we had smaller circles.
Our logo up close looks like garbage.
Yeah, because it's got so many edges and stuff. I mean, the flowers right here look almost exactly like the type font that I used as an inspiration for the logo. So maybe we'll get lucky at some point and get some more art shapes, and maybe I'll feel up to going back and redoing it.
Maybe, yeah. Yeah, from far away our logo looks fantastic, and that's all that matters.
Yeah, yep. So that's all we're working on here, and then it pretty much wraps up the theming for the big wheel. And something we talked about too, you can kind of see it in that last shot of the path work. We're really going to work on that area to sort of start branching out the path and make it feel more natural and not so grid based like it is right now. But for the initial layout of the park, it makes sense. We just don't want to keep doing that. So
yeah, exactly.
And then here, just working on the ticket booths for the parking lot. So you can see I've already got some of the parking lot work done. Part of that was just because I actually spent way too much time researching parking lots and like traffic flow and all that kind of stuff. So I worked on certain layouts in the parking lot, and I actually, from what's in the background there, I actually end up changing, which you'll see in the time lapse in a minute. But I researched a lot of different sort of parking entrances and things, and I came across a building that looked pretty similar to this, and I can't remember what park it was from. I want to say it was maybe Six Flags Magic Mountain. I can't remember, but anyway, I really liked the look of it. I thought it kind of fit in with the entrance building. Small, but still had some of the charm and character that we see on those buildings here. So, and then for the cover itself, I just copied the tops of the ticket booths over, and that was nice because it saved a lot of time.
Yeah, really. So I guess one thing we can possibly talk about right now, I think the first episode we actually talked about one of our ideas of doing a heavily backstage. So we didn't really want to kind of make this park, I don't know how to say it. We kind of don't want to forget about the backstage park. We want it to look perfect. We want this park to become an actual park and not just place rides, place buildings that work. We want to actually have a backstage part that functions. So I guess if you want, we can start talking about what you kind of thought about for backstage, because you are a professional at the backstage.
Yeah. I don't know about that, but so that will be, I thought I would be able to do this in one episode, like all of this, and that's just not the case. So in the backstage area, that'll probably be in my next build, and what we're going to do is we'll probably have some like loading docks, and there's some like staff parking in the delivery area, and both sides have some paths that sort of go along the edge of the park that lead to the backstage. And I went ahead and put in the work trucks that I made for my Ferris park and things like that to start adding detail to it. But in terms of the grand vision, I mean, just trying to be detailed with it and make it feel like it's functional, and that's like an example of an area where we can start adding some sort of some kind of grime and some dinginess, and because if you think about from the context of one thing, because of the Bro Coaster series that I've started doing personally, is thinking about the cost of things. So you and I in this park, like we don't have like a budget for specific areas, so like that's not like a thing we're trying to do. But when you're building anything, it helps to think in that context though, and I think that'll help us too when we try to add some more character type features, because sometimes like shoddy and rundown can bring character, and so
exactly.
Thinking in that mindset of hey, what would things have cost? Like for example, if you're building a structure, anything round or curved is going to be more expensive than anything boxy or square. Just as one example. So like thinking in that mindset, has definitely helped. And that's something that I'll try to be implementing in the backstage area as well hey, they're not going to spend money to make it look nice. And for example, like the parking lot here, when I get into it, you'll see that it has like planters and stuff, and some nice boxes that sort of border the parking spaces and stuff. for the employee parking in the Backstage, it has none of that because they're not going to spend the money to, to maintain that in the Backstage area. There's no park would, they don't care about their staff like that.
Yeah.
Like they don't need to maintain water and landscaping and someone to work that stuff just for the staff. So those are the types of mindset changes I've tried to make to get away from sort of my perfectionist nature that I get stuck into. But it's really honestly been a challenge. I mean, and that's an example of, we've talked about this before in some episodes where, you can learn so much from so many of the series that are out there and so from so many of these collaborations, because thinking in that mindset and doing design in that mindset is not easy, and it doesn't come natural to everybody. So it's been something that's sort of stretched me creatively, as weird as that might sound, to do kind of dingy stuff, but it definitely has.
Yeah, it's done the same for me as well. I mean, now that we've really talked about having like heavy backstage areas and stuff, when you start building, you actually think about how this building can be functional in such a way where it can receive deliveries. If it's a food shop, if it can receive, if someone needs to maintain different parts of it, if it needs an access point in the back, and the access point in the back needs to be off to some point where guests can't really see it and really see things going in and out, and that's something to constantly think about. And one of the things that we talked about, we're going to have this park being built with Backstage in mind. I mean, you've already put like some back access roads for different trucks to send deliveries to different parts of the park, that at least we have now. And we've set up the actual like different we've set up the basis for having like different parts being able to be accessed by like the staff parking lot and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And just kind of keeping it off to the side, out of mind, out of sight. Exactly.
Yeah, but still functional. And that's, it definitely takes some planning. So like all this path work, the reason I didn't record it is because I would like do stuff and then realize that wouldn't actually function that way. And so most of the recording is just a mess because of that. But, it's just like a totally different way of thinking. And it's, like I said, it's been something that stretched me creatively. But it's been fun too. It's not like it's not like it's work. It's just been cool to learn new techniques and different things like that. So.
Yeah, and one of the things, we got a comment that in my episode, and someone actually pointed out for my train station that would not work for someone who's possibly like in a wheelchair or kind of disabled in that sense, because it's all staircases, there's no way up.
Right.
And that's something that completely like went out of my mind, because I'm just building as just like a park and something to look nice, and I kind of like didn't think about the functionality of that. It's like, it's something to think about,
Yeah, and those are definitely the types of details that, if you were a casual observer, like if you downloaded the park, you might not notice that, but something about it would just subconsciously feel correct, because it's something you've probably seen a million times in real life, but haven't taken the time, to think about it, but you've seen it, and so it feels right. And so, so all this being said, to kind of summarize, our commentary of this episode is, it's been a learning process for both of us, and
of course,
kind of thinking in different ways and having a different mindset when it comes to these buildings. And so things might change, and things might, we might do more of the same in certain areas, but it's going to be constantly evolving based on kind of us learning. So
and you kind of start to appreciate, like when you go to a theme park after getting the experience that we've had here, you start to appreciate that it actually works, and like things like that work,
Yeah, like someone put the time and effort into making that decision or making that function. So
yeah, it's really
but
cool.
I think we're about out of time lapse here. So again, sorry, it's probably a little bit of a choppy episode, but there was a lot of sort of foundational work that needed to get done, and I'm happy with how it turned out from the standpoint of really framing in the park and kind of giving us a good foundation to branch out from. So I'm excited to see what you do in the next episode, which, just to let everyone know, it would normally come out on October 4th, but it's going to be September 11th, September 4th. Getting a month ahead here, but it would normally come out on September 4th, but it will be out on September 11th, because you are going to go on a fun trip.
Yes, I'm going on vacation to Toronto.
Nice. So there will be basically, instead of 2 weeks, it'll be a 3-week gap. But yeah, we'll be over on Commando Santa's channel for the next episode. But thank you guys so much for watching. Really appreciate you taking the time. And yeah, we'll see you in the next episode.
See ya.